In playing 12 minutes, I came to the realization that our mind is a space we cannot escape. And I mean, it's undoubtedly a space, with streets and byways of youth intersecting with peaks and valleys of emotional struggle, all compacted into memories that, in spite of whatever urge otherwise, will not leave us without taking more than we're willing to pay. 12 minutes is memory compressed into a single apartment and a single span of time. 12 minutes, on repeat ad nauseum, like a trauma the protagonist cannot escape the recognition of.
Oh my god.
And this trauma consists of an officer who arrests the protagonist's wife or murders him.
Out.
Or it consists of the night he murders her or himself, or any combination of dismal choices limited by space and memory and of what the protagonist is willing to learn. This is another time loop tale, a la films like Groundhog Day and Edge of Tomorrow, or other games like Outer Wilds, Returnal, and Majora's Mask. And much like these stories, the protagonist has the capacity to progress by being the singular figure in a looping environment capable of retaining memories. Knowledge is a gift, not a burden here. The only way forward and out is through retention and acceptance of what's there to discover. And there's much to discover in these walls. The game is itself a practice in information gathering and use. Through thin branches of dialogue trees, we question the only person open to our curiosity, the protagonist's wife, and we learn her hopes to have a child and live as a flowering family.
I'm pregnant! We're having a baby!
And her secrets, the parts of herself that make these walls constraining, and each branch of conversation stifling.
I don't know. This is a mistake.
This leads to perpetual repetition. But repetition in game design is nothing new. Classic arcade games sucked quarters down drains of darkened hours, with lit faces staring at looped backgrounds and animated sprites for days on end with little progress. To become good enough to waste less dollars was the ultimate prize. Honed mastery emerged out of repeated attempts toward an explicit goal. Though the goal in 12 minutes is far from explicit, the road toward mastery is much the same. We maneuver through a singular space, using our failures from the past to prompt our button presses, discovering the full range of movement within the constraining square of a screen. And over time, what was once the same old flattened diorama becomes a pattern seen and recognized and conquered. The pattern we learn and must maintain and employ is how various objects interact, and how information itself garners further information. In the case of objects, we can combine whatever seems fit to function in tandem: sleeping pills dipped into a cup of water, a knife to turn the screws of a grate. And through knowledge of the loops that came before, we can determine the function that affects loops going forward. 12 minutes orients this repetitious design around secrets. As we gain more of the past that's hidden, we use that information to spur further conversations, and these conversations themselves round the edges of what's known to the point of revelation.
In a few seconds, we're gonna hear thunder.
The forecast is clear?
Yeah, I know. Wait and see.
Thunder. Wow. That was spooky. How did you do that?
You see? I'm in a time loop. You believe me now?
We attempt to discover what the wife so eagerly hides in hopes that doing so will resolve the trap we find ourselves in. And we discover how deeply rooted the fear of knowledge is, how truly terrifying. This is horror in the midst of love. The wife loves her husband and the future she envisions. Yet she recoils at the horror of her past mistakes and fears the horror of her husband's response upon finding out who she's capable of being.
I did some things in the past. I made some mistakes. And those mistakes might not stay in the past.
The narrative thread she clings to so tightly is one that weaves a happy home and a comforting smile and high moral certainty atop a bed of secrets. This is a test of truth, one that many relationships face. Is the pain that results from utter honesty worth the telling? The wife asks this directly at one point.
Okay. So what if, hypothetically, I had an affair?
Excuse me?
No, I mean I didn't. But if I had had one, would you want to know?
I don't know.
The consequences we face in this game seem to force an answer. No matter how tightly wound our secrets, their consequences manifest. In this case, her past actions haunt her waking moments, fomenting tension between herself and her husband, a schism of knowledge gaping wider through the years. In hiding the truth, it emerges with a capital T, a sharpened edge precisely oriented to tear the deep connections so necessary to growth within a homely bubble of marital cohesion. The back and forth of questioning, the tugging at words to elicit response, the directing of gaze toward objects as proof, mimics the intensity of seeing a spouse's baited eyes veiling secrets and wanting desperately for an opening of hearts and an ending of lies. The protagonist becomes more desperate as he knows what is to come. Half of this frustration cannot be mere fear of death. Death is meaningless in this case, just another loop beginning again and again. The frustration is in the knowing that the person in front of you holds the key to the tranquil comfort of coherence in the space you're living in, and yet as an act of betrayal will not commit to the truth so necessary to such coherence.
I know the truth. The truth about the watch, your father.
What is this? All these accusations? We're done talking about this.
And so as the loops wind and the combination of efforts increase, so too the winding resentment of just not getting an answer, just not getting cooperation, just not moving forward together toward a singular and yet mutually beneficial end.
Babe, stop lying to me.
We feel frustration playing these sequences without shift, again and again, as we should. The repetition of dealing with someone's fear of honesty is frustrating, rightfully so. But consider now that the wife is trapped, too. She knows she can't escape her past. In daily moments of quiet, anxiety consumes her into torturous awareness of the chasm that lies within the room. She can't stop imagining the worst to come, that her husband will learn who she is and abandon the love they've nourished through the years, that this guilt will consume her capacity to remain open and loving, that her past mistake is indicative more of who she is now than the smile she presents in daily motions. And so when she asks the hypothetical of an affair, she's gauging the husband's willingness to forgive, to grasp the many steps along the timeline of a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, the past is in the past. It's better to keep it there if it's just gonna hurt me.
So lying would be better.
I mean, no, not lying, but look, if this hypothetical affair was over and it's in the past and it's not affecting us, why lob a grenade?
Right. Okay. So.
We should not forget that the suffering goes both ways here. Both characters trapped in an anguishing loop they can't escape. In one sense, to trap us in this loop is an act of forced empathy, to feel the unceasing repetition of one's own intrusive past mistakes seeping into one's current happy home. But of course, the challenge for empathy goes far deeper than that. Now it is necessary for me to discuss spoilers, because this game is attempting to bridge a far wider recess than most players will willingly cross. The murderous man whose arrival is forever foreshadowed is a man seeking revenge for the wife's attempted murder. She shot her father on Christmas Eve, ran off, tried to start a new life, and soon met her husband. All's well that ends well, right? Except she also stole her father's pocket watch. And this thing is apparently worth a fortune, enough so that when the cop hears from a local pawnshop owner that the wife attempted to sell it, perhaps in an attempt to remove the final physical remnant of a past vice, the cop decides he's justified in taking it back to pay for his own daughter's hospital bills.
You're gonna give me his watch. Only question is how much you make me hurt you before you do.
Yet, of course, the twists don't end there. In fact, they wind tighter than most would willingly endure. We learned via torturous interrogation of said officer that the father did not die on Christmas Eve. He recovered from his wound. Rather, he died a week later, New Year's Eve, from 2 point-blank shots to the body while the daughter was far away at a New Year's Eve party, a portrait on the refrigerator proof of her whereabouts.
New Year's Eve, 8 years ago. It's less than a week after she shot her father. I can't imagine what she must have been going through.
There is another character who's been with us all along. Another slant in this web of deceit. The wife's father had an affair. The nanny whom he'd had an affair with birthed a child, a boy. Some of you listening may discern precisely where this is heading. The boy, the half-brother of the wife, the one who actually is the eventual murderer of the father on New Year's Eve, is the husband we've been playing all along. The true secret in the room is not so much the wife's vicious attack against her own father, but the husband's seething desire for his own sister and his willingness to kill his father to keep such desire hidden, to enact temptation without consequence. The disgust you feel should be prominent now. We are discussing incest, knowing incest on the part of the husband, including but not limited to full-on manipulation of his sister. He tricks her into both an incestuous relationship and into believing that her father's death was by her own hands alone. All that misery she suffers daily, all that guilt and blame she internalizes, foisted upon her by the one she trusts most. And this man is her brother. Nausea would not be unwarranted at this point. I forgive you the feeling. They're about to have a child together. The consequences of such a union are not yet fully known and potentially insurmountable and lifelong. Still, this corkscrew narrative twists ever tighter. Still, there is more to consider. In the moment the game reveals the night of the actual murder, we see the father confronting his son, insisting that the son not pursue his love for the daughter. And through audio cue, an intense confusion emerges, at least it did for me. The voice actor for the father is Willem Dafoe.
Look, I know this is a terrible shock, but we need to be on the same page.
The same voice actor as the cop who repeatedly breaks into the couple's home every loop.
Come on, I know you're home. Open the door.
This can't be happening.
That doesn't make sense. It's an impossibility. The cop can't be the father, as the only reason for the cop's arrival is vengeance for the father's death. This is utter nonsense, a seeming plot hole too deep to fathom. This is where benefit of the doubt for a creator's motives must emerge. Years were spent in the making of this game. Such a protruding crack in the narrative chain can't have been missed for so long, especially as it juts so sharply against every other link. We have to believe that this choice is a choice, that it's a hint of deeper analysis. Another hypothesis must emerge, necessary, to tie these seemingly conflicting facts together. At the opening of the game, we stare at a clock face, similar to the pocket watch, similar to the clock in the room where the father is murdered. A high note pitches as we zoom into that clock and now stare at a split-faced reflection of our protagonist selves, a doorway about to open to the door containing the suffering that follows. A painting to the left of the entryway, a bookshelf with a book tinted red. A painting to the right, a dahlia flower. These paintings are far too exact a mirror of the events yet to come. The dahlia flower is exactly the name of the child the wife anticipates. That child's name itself modeled after the name of the husband's mother, Dahlia.
Why Dahlia?
I wanted to name her for your mother.
The red book painted on the shelf is like the book the wife continuously reads loop after loop, and is all the more like the red book on the shelf behind the protagonist as he confronts his father with his desires. None of this has been real. The loop is that of imagination's various consequential manifestations, of the act of fantasizing about what we know we should not do, and yet fantasizing still because the realm of our minds is hours and hours alone. No laws can bind us here, no social faux pas to avoid, no prying words or prying eyes. We stare at the reflection of a man reflecting on a desire he knows he should not have, and yet he has it, and he knows he cannot act on such desires outside his own mind. Guilt is this game's foundation, desire its catalyst, and fulfillment and forgiveness forever out of reach. The wife's suffering has parallel now, her shame a metaphor for the protagonist's own. When she finally confesses her crimes, the husband forgives her without hesitation.
I don't care. It doesn't matter. I forgave everything, all of it. All that matters is that we have each other. That's it.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
How could he not? He himself is trapped by the same secret, or at least a similar one. He is precisely the sort of person to be understanding of someone else's desire to shatter the limits of familial bonds. The protagonist finds solace in mental escapism, in branching away by entering within. He tries to hide in his own mind his incestuous fixations. In the mechanics of the game, what we learn about others overturns possible future choices. In the mechanics of the protagonist's mind, what he learns about himself overturns his entire perception of what's real. The cop whose voice matches the father is a figment of what the protagonist knows. His secret is not his alone. His father is an outside force always set to get in the way. Maybe one interpretive direction of this storyline is that he fathoms the way consequences continue even if he were to murder his father.
Sir? Sir?
And how those consequences will never leave, not truly. Maybe one interpretive direction is that we are following a man who can't bear who he is, who confesses it openly, and who in the scolding that follows imagines a different life, a different space, out of time, out of restraints, his own to ponder. The way these thoughts linger and loop and torture is much like standing before the open window of a high-rise and imagining all the ways and consequences of our own defenestrated leap into open air, fixated thoughts looping back and again through the rushing air past us and the ground eventually through us. And despite the knowing resistance to such action, our minds wander back to it nonetheless. The protagonist's sexual desire cannot and should not be pursued, yet desire is itself so enduringly binding, a secret locked within the confines of mind and its hollow, echoing chambers. The protagonist can forgive his wife. He can do so readily, because he himself knows what it is to feel trapped by who he is, by his own choices. He can't blame her. Not really. Empathy comes upon reflection on all our luckily unmanifested desires. And now we are forced into a place of empathy with the looping suffering of a man whose desires we cannot share without recoiling. But his desires remain in mind, not reality. Can we forgive such thoughts, if they remain thoughts? Should we? This has been To Games It May Concern. I've spewed my thoughts plenty. Your turn to answer my various questions or to turn them back on me. What are the boundaries of sympathy? Are thoughts and fantasies crime enough? Does the protagonist's internal desires portend some deeply sickening moral essence that we as softly walking outsiders know should be expunged for the sake of safety and society's structural foundation? Should a game present these topics without warning? Is it wrong to isolate the wife of a narrative to that of fictional artifice to please a husband's demeritorious ends? Is disgust enough to decide what is right or what is wrong? Or do the consequences matter most? Had the protagonist practiced proper birth control, would that change the outcome? Is incest now less sickening without a child at play? Is ignorance truly bliss? Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Like to promote this video for others. Subscribe if you'd like to see more. Share if you want to gather interest and to push the conversation further. And most importantly of all, thanks for watching.